In 1776, America was a small collection of colonies. Today, it is the world's most powerful nation. How did this transformation happen?
Before the massive skyscrapers touched the clouds, before a digital economy completely reshaped our world, and honestly, long before it became the most powerful nation on Earth, America was just this vast, mysterious continent. Think back to 1776. The United States was basically nothing more than a tiny group of 13 weak colonies that were actively losing a war. Yet somehow, from those struggling, disconnected little settlements, human history's most dominant superpower was engineered. So today, in this explainer, we are going to look at the exact architectural blueprints of that unbelievable rise.
Just consider the staggering contrast here between 1776 and today. Back then, you had 13 rebellious colonies barely hanging on against literally the mightiest empire on the planet. Fast forward 2.5 centuries, and you're looking at a nation that runs the global economy, commands the most powerful military in human history, and culturally dominates the globe. So how did this unbelievable transformation actually happen? How on earth does a nation go from a starving underdog rebellion to a global empire in just a few lifetimes? Let's figure it out.
To really answer that, we actually have to rewind all the way back to the early 1600s to settlements like Jamestown. And look, early survival was brutal. We're talking famine, disease, constant conflict. Out of 500 colonists in Jamestown, only 60 survived the first year. But they didn't collapse. And that's because they possessed 3 specific geographic and demographic cheat codes. Number 1, unlimited, fertile, resource-rich land. Number 2 is distance. They had 3,000 miles of ocean protecting them from the constant draining wars over in Europe. And number 3, the people themselves. These were religious refugees, ambitious entrepreneurs, and outcasts. Basically the hungriest, most driven people on Earth.
Okay, let's dive into this military matchup, because this is where the story gets absolutely wild. By the 1770s, those colonies were actually generating real wealth, and, well, Britain wanted a cut. Taxes were imposed, tension completely boiled over, and the shot heard round the world was fired. But just look at the stark reality of this 1776 matchup. The British Empire had 50,000 professional soldiers, the absolute best navy on the globe, and unlimited cash. The American colonies? They had essentially no money, zero naval power, and a totally disorganized militia of untrained farmers. Every expert in Europe reasonably bet on Britain, and honestly, who could blame them?
King George III himself famously said, "A few regiments of regular troops will be sufficient to subdue the colonies." Talk about a colossal underestimation by a global power. But George Washington implemented a brilliant strategy. He realized, hey, I don't necessarily have to win traditional battles, I just have to not lose. He stretched the British Army across 1,000 miles, making them fight in this vast, unfamiliar territory with no real supply lines. He literally just outlasted them. And when America secured a shocking victory at the Battle of Saratoga, France, Spain, and the Netherlands jumped in. Suddenly, Britain wasn't just fighting farmers, they were fighting the whole world.
By 1783, the impossible actually happened. Britain surrendered. But defeating the British was really only step 1. The reality of their situation was honestly pretty grim. This new nation had no functional government, no standing army, no money, and absolutely zero experience running a country. States were already fighting with each other, and there was even talk of just splitting into 3 different countries right then and there. Most external observers fully expected this fragile new America to completely collapse within 5 years. They were staring down the barrel of total systemic failure.
Which brings us to the absolutely crucial summer of 1787. 55 men walked into Independence Hall in Philadelphia, locked the doors, and shut the windows. It was a tense, incredibly high-stakes gamble. For 4 months, they argued relentlessly over how to invent a functional nation entirely from scratch. They argued over state power, and they argued bitterly over whether enslaved people should count toward representation. The debates were so incredibly intense that Benjamin Franklin gave us this great quote, saying the Constitution gave him a, quote, constant headache. So the really important point is what they actually produced in that locked room. They created the system, the oldest written constitution still in use today. And they did something entirely unprecedented. They separated power into 3 branches and made the government answer directly to the people instead of a king. This adaptable system was the true cheat code of American history. It provided a stable yet super flexible framework that over the next 100 years became an absolute magnet for global talent, attracting 40 million immigrants by the year 1900.
But to utilize all that amazing human potential, this new nation needed space. And that brings us to this shocking number. 4 cents. That was the exact cost per acre of Thomas Jefferson's 1803 Louisiana Purchase. In what is likely the greatest real estate deal in all of human history, the United States bought 828,000 square miles right from France. Overnight, literally with the stroke of a pen, the nation's size completely doubled.
But we absolutely have to look objectively at the grim reality of this expansion. That newly acquired land was not empty. It was home to millions of Native Americans. President Andrew Jackson's stark words that the ultimate and most complete destruction of the Indians is necessary really capture the brutal perspective of the era's leadership regarding indigenous populations. The drive to expand was absolute, and it came with massive, devastating human costs that permanently altered the entire continent.
The costs of this relentless physical expansion were just enormous. The forced relocations like the Trail of Tears resulted in the deaths of thousands, including 4,000 Cherokee. Later, through the Mexican-American War, the U.S. took control of California, Texas, and the entire Southwest. Now, what's really interesting here is a unique strategic choice they made. These new territories didn't become colonies or dependencies. They became full states with full equal rights, integrating seamlessly into the system as the nation stretched continuously from ocean to ocean.
However, by 1860, this explosive growth brought the country's deepest contradiction to a breaking point: slavery. Half the country demanded it, half opposed it. The result was absolutely devastating. 620,000. That is the number of Americans who died in the Civil War. To put that into perspective for you, that is more casualties than all other American wars combined, all the way up until Vietnam. It was a brutal, bloody conflict that threatened to permanently tear the entire experiment apart.
The North eventually won, the country remained intact, and slavery was abolished. But what happened next is fascinating. The devastation of the Civil War paradoxically forced a massive, rapid reconstruction. Moving from the end of the war in 1865 into the 1880s, we see an absolute explosion in steel, oil, electricity, and railroads. Driven by figures like Carnegie, Rockefeller, and Edison, America transformed from a farming society into an industrial powerhouse so quickly that by 1900 its economy was larger than Britain, France, and Germany combined. It's just wild.
So, America is incredibly rich and heavily industrialized by the turn of the 20th century, but honestly, the rest of the world isn't really paying that much attention yet. And that leads us to a pivotal question. What happens to a rising, highly industrialized America when the old world decides to completely destroy itself? Well, this brings us to 1914 and the outbreak of World War I. The stark reality of the First World War's aftermath is super clear when you look at the data. For 3 years, America stayed out of the fighting, basically just selling weapons and making billions. When they finally entered in 1917, the human toll was comparatively light, 116,000 American dead versus a catastrophic 20 million dead over in Europe. Europe's infrastructure is completely reduced to rubble. Meanwhile, America's land is entirely untouched, its factories are humming, and its banks are now holding the vast majority of the world's gold.
This unmatched physical and economic security triggered a massive shift in global financial dominance. The United States dollar officially replaced the British pound as the world's reserve currency. The US really capitalized on European devastation to emerge not just as a wealthy nation, but as the central pillar of the entire global financial system. The former little colony was now, officially, the richest, most secure nation on Earth.
And that sets the stage for our next major era, the American century, spanning from 1945 to 1975.
20 years after the First World War, World War II erupted. And this time, America didn't just win the war, they basically built the entire new world order that followed. The sheer scale of these pillars of global dominance was just unprecedented. I mean, America spearheaded the creation of the United Nations. They literally funded the rebuilding of Europe and Japan through the Marshall Plan. Militarily, they controlled half the world's nuclear weapons. Culturally, their exports from Hollywood movies and rock music to blue jeans and Coca-Cola infiltrated every single corner of the globe. Oh, and scientifically, they put a man on the moon in 1969. Not Rome, not Britain, no one had ever wielded this much comprehensive, simultaneous global power.
Which begs a really important question for us today. The world has changed drastically since 1975. So how is America still so powerful today? I mean, it's faced the existential dread of the Cold War, the absolute tragedy of 9/11, grinding conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the rapid economic rise of modern China. Yet the United States remains right at the absolute center of the global order. If it's not just their military anymore, and it's not just their geography, what is the actual root of this incredible resilience?
Well, the answer ties this entire explainer together. The ultimate secret weapon isn't a bomb or a bank,
It's the system. Yep, the exact same constitution drafted in that locked, sweaty room in 1787. It's the structural combination of free speech, free markets, and the continuous ability to attract the smartest, most ambitious talent from anywhere in the world. Look, every time America faces a massive systemic crisis, the Civil War, the Great Depression, world wars, or modern terrorism, the system allows it to adapt, restructure, and actually emerge stronger on the other side. It was never just luck, guys. It was architectural design.
So, having decoded the blueprints of how a tiny, failing colony transformed into history's ultimate superpower, I want to leave you with this to ponder. We know exactly how they got here, but what happens next? Will this adaptable system allow America to stay on top for the next 100 years, or are the cracks starting to show, paving the way for a new global superpower to take the reins? It's a fascinating question and one the entire world is watching unfold right now. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history that shapes our world.